Hi, I'm Chris Brubaker. Ed Schmitz and I are partners in Hantzmon Wiebel's advisory services practice, and we want to speak to you today a little bit about profit and how your organization can improve its profitability. What we're going to talk about today is a webinar that we presented live a week or so ago. We had a bit of technical difficulty as far as the recording of that went, so we're just recording it again today to be able to share a little bit more broadly. We will have our contact information at the end of the presentation, so if you have any questions, even though you can't ask them live, certainly feel free to reach out to either Ed or me anytime you have a question. We'll be happy to help out if we can. So first question, and maybe the most important question, is why focus on profit at all? Certainly are a number of measures that a business can use to measure how well it's doing. But profit, we think, is probably the most important you can look at for several reasons. One is that really profit is a measure of how well a business is using its resources and how well it's serving its clients. At its most basic, if you think about it, profit is the value that you've provided to someone else in excess of the resources you've used to produce that value. So it's always a good measure of how well you're serving others. Another thing for profit is that it does provide the capital that a business or another organization needs to grow and thrive, which also helps to make a business more resilient, which particularly in these times is something that will be important to any organization. And then profit also is just it's a reward for owners for their risks in starting and operating a business. And we'll see that profit and growth sometimes can be competing values for an organization. Growth is certainly a target, and sometimes organizations are well justified in targeting growth versus targeting profit. But I think we would say that at some point, if a business's growth is not profitable, it's not going to be able to survive and to thrive. And so that's why we wanted to focus today on profit. At its most simple, profit really does equal a business's revenue minus its expenses. And so that's the framework that we're going to use today to frame what we talk about. We'll spend the first part of our discussion talking about revenue and ways to improve revenue. And then the second part looking at expenses and ways that a business can use to limit those so that we can generate a better profit all around.
Thanks, Chris. So before we get too far into the profit and the revenue side, and I want to take a few minutes to talk about the now, where, how philosophy. And really, when we go back to this formula here, and you say, well, where is your profit now? And what are your revenue numbers? What are your expense numbers now? And then where do you want them to be? So, for instance, if you are a supermarket, and traditionally, historically, the industry average is 1% net profit, you might think, well, I want 15% net profit, which, that's fine, but then you're going to have to rethink how you want to do things, and that's going to really permeate throughout the whole organization. So are you going to have products, exclusive products that other people don't have? Are you going to have is your idea going to be to just redefine what a supermarket is and what types of services are there, or whatever, so to get those types of profit margins? So you just have to be aware of what your industry average is and know where you are, because I think the answer is different if you're at 0.75% and you're trying to get to 1, or if you're at 1 trying to get to 1.5, or maybe to 5 or to 10 if you think you're going to redefine the market. So it's just important to know where you want to be, and then once you know where you want to be, then the how should come into focus. And again, before we get too far into it, I wanted to talk a little bit about sustainable competitive advantage, and that's really the "we will win by" statement. So, how are you going to compete in the marketplace? And there's different ways to compete. I've got some listed here on the slide. Could be the expertise of your team, the brand, the strategic assets, response time, all those things listed there. There's a host of others that they wouldn't fit all on one slide. So, but how are you going to compete in the marketplace? So for instance, to give you an example, Southwest Airlines, they compete on not only low price, but also that they're a little bit wacky. So, and that also permeates throughout the whole organization. So, they're not going to have their headquarters in Midtown Manhattan because they've got to keep costs low because they're going to be the low cost airline. If you've ever flown Southwest, sometimes you'll know that the pilots will miscall where they're going, just to be a little bit wacky and maybe scare the passengers a little bit. But again, it just kind of permeates the whole organization. So that's going to look different than, let's say, an Apple company who, they really compete on innovation. They're going to be the most innovative. So they don't compete on price at all. So in fact, and people line up when there's a new release of a phone or whatever to get the latest and greatest, because their reputation is on innovation, and people want that. So, and they're creating markets that we didn't even know we even needed 10, 15, 20 years ago. So if you think about also like a gym, how are they going to compete in the marketplace? Well, they can compete on, maybe being the biggest gym in the area. They could be the, maybe they pride themselves on having a great reservation system, so there's no waiting on any machines, or they're going to have the most trainers, or they're going to have the best trained trainers, so the expertise is the highest. So, again, how are you going to compete in the marketplace? So you really got to get this right, because it's going to influence everything else and some of these other decisions that we're going to be talking about today.
One of the first tools that we'll talk about is the product surround model. And the value of this tool is to help you really kind of understand, one, your product, but then more importantly, what your customers value in your product. And that's a theme we'll touch on several times, especially in the revenue sections today, is really being focused on customers more so than on what we think is good about what we do. And so the tool itself looks pretty simple. There's the sort of target thing here, where we have the core in the middle, which is really kind of the basics of what you do. And if we want to grab an example, like Ed was just talking about a gym, so the core really is the weights or the equipment and maybe a building, and it's the basics that you really need to run your operation. The surround is really everything else that comes around and differentiates one product from another. And what we would see is that customers tend to really value what's in that surround area more so than the core product. The core product is almost taken as a given, and it's the surrounding things that customers see as more important. So again, going back to the gym, if we're assuming that all gyms have workout equipment, all gyms have a building for people to be in, what are some other things that a customer might focus on? And it could be some things like times that you're open. So if, say, I like working out late at night, but your gym closes at 9 o'clock, that is probably not one I'm going to look at. Others might be things like group classes, amenities the gym might have. Certainly we'll see that price is an important differentiator, and then maybe something like personality. Personal training. And so those are all things that would kind of come in that outside surround area. And it's really important for us to understand, for whatever our product or service is, not only what's our core, but also what surrounds that, because that'll help us identify what market we want to work with, what our best customer will be, and really help to sell to that and really provide value to customers for things that they want to use.
Okay, this next area deals a little bit with pricing strategy, and this is just a tool to go through and analyze how you compete in the marketplace with pricing. And again, there's other ways to compete besides pricing, but you need to be aware of how you are priced in the marketplace, because if you're priced too low, you're leaving profit on the table, and if you're priced too high, you're probably losing business that you should get. So it is important to get your pricing right. So in this little tool here, the first step is really the cost plus, and the plus meaning the profit. So what is, you should have your labor costs, materials costs, overhead, and what profit you want. and then so that should be the price. So in this case, let's, as an example, if we were a laptop manufacturer, our price is $1,000. So step 2 is the competitor pricing. So we have 3 competitors here we're comparing ourselves to. Competitor A is pricing their laptop is $1,300, B's is $1,100, and C is $800. And step 3 is we have to look at the market and, you know, the actual product itself from the customer's perspective. So, you know, what benefits are there, in this case, of the laptop from the customer's perspective? So reliability, the weight and size of it, the speed, storage capacity, and then those factors, whatever those factors are for your product, they're weighted, and the weights all add up to 100. So, and then what you do is you put your product first and you score yourself at 50, even though you might think yours is, you know, the greatest product ever or greatest service ever. You still score yourself only at 50 for this exercise. And then you compare yourself to the competitors. So in this case, for reliability, competitor A is a little, their laptop's a little bit more reliable. So, you know, there's 40 points in this category to give. So I scored them at 30 and we had 20. Competitor B is about the same as us, is 20. Competitor C is a little less reliable. I scored it at 15. The size and weight. So the weighting factor is a score of 30. We scored ourselves 15. Competitor A and B, they're about the same as us. Competitor C, theirs is a little bit more bulky, so weighs a little bit more, so they only score a 10 there. On the other categories, speed and storage capacity, they were all scored about the same because they're basically using the same components, and so that would be about the same. So in this fictional scenario, you know, we've scored ourselves at 50, competitor A is at 60, competitor B is 50, and C is 40. So, you know, you can kind of use this as a tool to think about, okay, well, you know, we're already, if you remember the pricing, you know, we're already lower than competitors A and B. So if we didn't change our product at all, we could probably at least increase our price to some degree and still compete on price. And another way to think about it is, well, what if we could increase our reliability? How much would it cost us to increase our reliability for the laptop? And if we could get it up to the same reliability as competitor A, we might be able to increase our price $250 to $300. So if it costs us $50 to do that, we can gain quite a bit of profit by doing that. So again, this is just a tool to think about how you're competing and is your price competitive and what are customers valuing.
Okay, so now we want to take some of the tools we've talked about and look into developing a sales process. And what we've seen with a lot of businesses is that they really don't have any kind of systematized process for doing sales. Sales are more ad hoc. You know, the benefit of having a process is it's something that you can, you know, you're not having to develop it every time you try to sell. You can also learn from what's worked or what's not worked, and hopefully see some improvement as you go from one opportunity to another. And a big piece of the process, and a book we recommend, a book we've used ourselves, is this book Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. It's a good book in that it's really not, it's helpful for people particularly who are not comfortable with traditional selling. A lot of the focus is really on working on helping people to see selling as more solving problems for clients rather than just trying to move money from their pocket to yours, which is obviously, you know, for those of us in business, we know that's not really what we're trying to do. We're all, you know, we all believe in our products. We all believe we can help people, and we're just trying to find ways to reach out to as many people as we can. And so this helps change the mindset to selling, to really see it as being more helping people than just selling to them. Another benefit that Rackham has seen from some of the studies that he's done, that he mentions in the book, is that this technique really works better for larger sales than it does for small sales. because in a larger sale, you're more interested in developing a relationship and having more of a long-term relationship with customers than you do in some smaller sales. There's a lot in the book. It's not a long book, but it does pack a lot of information. Some of what it boils down to is the SPIN piece, which SPIN is an acronym that stands for situation, problem, implication, and need payoff. What those are is a series of questions or of types of questions that Rackham identifies that that a person can use in talking to a potential customer. The situation question is really just basic facts about the business. It doesn't go very deep. It's just kind of helping understand what's basically going on there. And what we can say here is that you really don't want to ask a lot of situation questions when you're getting into a meeting with a potential customer. Most of those types of questions you can probably find answers to on your own before you even get to the meeting, just by doing a little bit of homework. So that your time is valuable, your potential customer's time is valuable. It's better if you can use that valuable time more on some deeper types of questions. And for those, we start with the P, the problem questions, and that question is really centered on what is the problems that the potential customer may be having. And I think we would see that it really, as good as any business may be, all businesses have some kinds of problems. All businesses have owners have some worries that they're concerned with. And so those problem questions help to get to that. And sometimes it's going to be necessary to hear what the potential customer is saying, and ask a second level of question to get a little bit deeper to really understand the root causes of problems that the customer may be having. And so you'll see that asking questions is one thing and listening is another skill that's definitely going to be at least as important when you're having these conversations with potential customers. The I stands for implication, and this to me is really where you take a big leap in as far as the depth of the questions that you're asking. You're going beyond just what are your problems to what does that problem really mean to you. What Rackham says, and I think what we see, is that a lot of people who are not really well versed at sales and don't have a lot of experience will kind of go to that problem question and want to offer solutions right away. So I hear your problem. Okay, here's how I can solve that for you, without really asking the implication question that's going to get more buy-in from the potential customer. And so, you may ask, okay, you've got these problems. How does that cost you? What does that mean to you? It's kind of more of a so what question that's going to help the customer see that, okay, I mean, it's easier to put off a problem even though we know it's there if you don't really understand what it might mean to you and what problems it can cause down the line for your business. And then the last, the N is for need payoff, which that to me kind of flips from the negative of the implication questions to more of a positive benefits focused question with the need payoff. So that question is something like, okay, I see you have these problems. We've talked about how those problems can impact your business, and now I have a potential solution for you. What would that mean to you if we can help you solve those problems? And so it really kind of helps the buyer understand that there can be some benefits there, focuses on the buyer's needs and the buyer's benefits, and ends the call on a more positive note. Okay, so that's one piece that goes into the sales process. Looking at the process more in total, the first step, and we talked about this earlier, is really to understand your customers and identify what their needs are. And so that goes back to those first couple of tools that we talked about. It's asking questions like, who are the people that we want to serve? And then again, importantly, to identify what their needs are, more importantly than what we can do. And that's kind of goes to the second point too, of identifying the features and the benefits of our product and our service. And the distinction between a feature and a feature is really more inward focus. And I think that we tend to maybe focus on that too much as business people. We're happy with knowing the things that we can do. What can our product do? What kind of services can we offer to a client? The benefit side is really more outward focused, and that's more what the customer sees. And I think you'll see that customers don't care about features. Customers don't care what your product does or what your services can do. Customers care what that means to them and what benefits they can perceive. And so you really want to focus your attention not so much on your own product as on what benefits it can provide to your customers. The next is to ask spin questions, and so that goes back to the slide where we just were. And those are really to help your potential customer understand what his needs are, understand what the implications are to those needs, and then what benefit you can provide. These are important because it really kind of, if you ask the questions well, it moves from an implicit need where a customer may or may not know he has a need, but really hasn't defined it very well, to an explicit need. And in that case, the customer is saying, oh, well, I see that I need this. I really want to go out and find a way to solve this problem. It really creates more buy-in from the customer side. And I think what we see a lot is that if a customer can really come to a purchasing decision on his own, can really be involved in that, can really think it's his idea, more so than just somebody offering a service, you'll get a lot more buy-in and have a lot more sales success. The next point's important in that even if you have a great conversation with a potential customer and the customer really is interested in your product, really is interested in wanting to move forward, they still want to see that you can do what you say you can do, and that's this proof of capability piece. And there are a lot of ways to do that. I would say the number one proof of capability now is probably our website. I know that I, and certainly most people, I think if I'm going to investigate someone I'm thinking about working with, the first thing I'll do is Google the person's name and see what information I can find out that way. So if you have a good website that has good information there, and then maybe some testimonials from current customers, maybe some papers or other things that can be sort of thought leadership that can help you, show that you know what you're talking about. Those can really help out. An example there, say you're a CPA firm who wants to do work on helping people improve their profit. You might do something like produce a webinar that you can put on your website to have people look at, just to identify things you can talk about. And then the last piece that we talked about here is really turning it into a process, and it helps to document that so that you're keeping track of the steps you took, what worked, what didn't work. And I would say that learn from your successes, but maybe learn even more so from your failures. Be critical of yourself, be honest with yourself, see what worked well and what didn't work well. And doing those things are going to help you be able to build a process that you can repeat and get better at over time.
Okay, so now we're kind of back to the one-page plan, or to the now, where, how that we talked about before, and it's documented in this one-page plan. So, really what we do here is, before we get to this page, we've talked a little bit about various things, how to increase revenue, and with your team, you're going to want to brainstorm other ideas of ways to increase revenue. And then what you do with all those ideas is then you try to pick the top few that'll give you the biggest return or the best results, and that's kind of what's called the Pareto Principle. So if you can narrow it down maybe to 3 ideas that'll get you quite a few results, and then you break it down into what specific actions need to take place, who's specifically going to be responsible for it, and then when's it going to be done. And this will drive the implementation of this, of the ideas, and to move the dials forward. So, really what you're looking for here is to move dials in the right direction. So, and you want to use maybe a 6 to 8 week cycle. If you don't want to wait too long, but then, once you start seeing some results, then you can go back and take some of the other ideas that didn't make it on the first cut, and try to, work on those on the next 6 to 8 week cycle. And just, again, just trying to move dials, increase revenue where you can. So this is a one-page plan, puts everything together. It's got the now at the top left, where are you? And then where do you want to go on the top right? And then again, then it's got the actual, here's what we're going to do and who's going to do it and when to drive the implementation.
Okay, so we're back to our profit formula here. We talked a little bit about revenue so far, and now we'll focus on the expense side of the equation. And there we're really looking at eliminating waste. And a tool we've used there frequently with clients, and it's been pretty successful, is the 7 waste tool. It's a concept that some executives with Toyota developed, I think back in the 50s and 60s, but what we have seen is that even though it was developed for a large manufacturing company like Toyota, it really can be applicable to any type of organization. I mean, we've used it internally for the firm. We've used it for various types of clients. And, we've really seen that the wastes that Toyota identified, even if you have to tweak the definitions a little bit, can apply to really any type of organization. And so the first waste is overproduction, which is simply producing more that's needed at the time that it's needed.
So just to give you some ideas, so it's kind of easy to think about in the manufacturing world, the Toyotas of the world. So they're going to make too much finished products, make too many cars. But if you think about the service industry or wholesale retail, it could be over reviewing things. You're doing too much, creating reports that people don't look at or use incorrect information. So time is wasted creating reports that aren't really useful. In the service world, producing more than really what the client is asking for. So in wholesale retail would be, again, over purchasing goods.
Okay, and waiting, that simply is wasted time, essentially, where if I need for Ed to complete a step in his job before I can do my job, but I'm waiting for him to get that done, I'm sitting there wasting my time while I'm waiting for him. And so that's a big waste in a lot of organizations.
Yeah, so, waiting happens everywhere in every organization. So, you're waiting for customers to provide information, waiting for them to send in their purchase order, waiting for them to pay. You could be waiting for management to make a decision. It could be waiting for something to be reviewed. So, waiting happens everywhere. So it's something that to be looked into closely.
So transporting goes into how we move things throughout the processes of whatever the business's operations are.
So, thinking back to manufacturing, it would be, material handling, things like that, the layout of the factory. For service, it could be the traveling, going from client to client or things like that. Could be office layout. For wholesale retail, it's going to be the warehouse layout, possibly things like that.
Inappropriate processing, this is one we see a lot too, and it's really kind of boils down to using the right tool for the right job or having the right person do the right job.
And maybe even, using outdated equipment. Also could be printing reports instead of just looking at them, or using PDFs, or looking at them on your computer, but actually printing them out and then throwing the paper away after you look at it. Another thing to think about in inappropriate processing is kind of like non-standardized procedures. So different departments are doing things different ways. They're creating their own forms, creating their own things, instead of having a more standardized approach that gets the information more succinct. People are kind of recreating their own processes and extra processes.
Okay, inventory, and this is to me a bit similar to overproduction sometimes. Again, it's having more more tied up in something you've produced or purchased than what you really need.
Yeah, and to talk about that further, I mean, although there's some overlap, I mean, it's okay. I mean, the main point is for your team to come up with ideas, not to argue which category they go in. So they really want to create the biggest cost savings. So just some examples though, inventory, thinking about manufacturing, again, it's a little bit easier, you know, having too many raw materials or work in process. You know, for a service industry, work in process, you know, think of that as your inventory. You know, you've got to get that build. For wholesale retail, it could be the product range, having such a wide product range that you're tying up money in inventory.
Okay, number 6 is motions, and that really is talking about physical motion, so moving a person or a thing from one place to another.
Yeah, so ergonomics, you know, having a disorganized workplace, and whether that's on the manufacturing floor or in the office or in a warehouse, having a disorganized space. So, you know, how is the desk layout, or if you're talking about service industries, and really across all industries, that kind of start-stop mentality of picking, you know, stopping things, picking it up, setting it down, picking it up, setting it down.
Okay, and finally, the last is defects, and boy, we really see this in any type of organization. It's essentially not doing something right the first time.
Yeah, so they're touching it multiple times, and you know, having to fix things, going back and fixing things. So in the manufacturing world, of course, you're going to have scrap, but in the service world, you know, think about missing deadlines. That's could be a defect, or just, you know, making mistakes. In the wholesale retail area, you know, really poor quality of purchased product. So, you know, what we've done, you know, we've facilitated a few of these, and you know, we found that there's been some great discussions amongst the team members. You know, if you get enough people in the room, you know, you want to have smaller teams, but well represented teams throughout the organization, and you know, they really come up with really good ideas of and identification of where these wastes are. So, you know, really, you know, a good idea would be to ask your teams to brainstorm going through all 7. There's only 3 on the slide here, but really to brainstorm all 7 wastes and try to identify where that's occurring in the organization. And then using this tool, this waste audit process, to zero in on some certain wastes. So in this case, you know, there's a column for cost and it's got numbers and everything. And, you know, don't think about it as an accounting exercise. You know, really, you know, probably just think about it as, you know, is it a low savings, moderate savings, or high savings? We can save a lot. So again, you don't want team members arguing, is this one cost really $34,000 or $35,000? That doesn't matter. You know, really, in the big picture, you're trying to identify, you know, there's going to be certain wastes that are going to save you a lot more than others. So you're trying to zero in on those. So this is a good way to gather that information. And then in the other column here, the ease of removal, and again, on a scale from whether it's, you know, -5 to +5 or 0 to 10, however you want to score it, you know, how easy is it going to be to remove? And we'll see on the next slide, by plotting them on the graph here, and you have the ease of removal on one side and savings on the other, you know, what we're going to look for is that upper right quadrant. So those are the easiest to remove and give us the biggest savings. And, you know, now in this case there's 3, but, you know, there could be 7 or 10 in that quadrant. So then from there, you know, you might want to have your team vote, like which are the top 3 that they think, you know, that we should take on as a project. And we end up with this.
Yeah. And again, this is the one-page plan that Ed showed you before on the revenue side. And again, it's just a way of moving the actions that we've decided to take into a plan. I really like this format for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, if you get a long plan, if you get a plan that's 100 pages of things you want to do, it's so easy to just get bogged down in that, or to just take it and throw it into your drawer and not do anything with it. Being able to get your thinking down into one page, to me, is very powerful. The other thing I think is really important is down, the kind of the lower right quadrant of the plan with the who and the when. So Ed talked about now, where, how. I think who and when are equally important questions. I would say the who, it doesn't necessarily mean that whoever's listed there needs to do that task. It's just someone needs to be able to be responsible for making sure that task gets done. In fact, it's probably better to have a team built around approaching it, but it's good to have one person who you can go to and say, hey, you're going to be responsible for taking care of this. And then obviously the when, setting a time when we're going to check back is very helpful for a lot of people. What we've seen is that somewhere between, say, 8 weeks and 90 days is a good time frame for trying to take a piece that you're going to do within a strategy. Anything shorter, you may not have enough time to make it work. Anything longer than that, people tend to be deadline driven, and so that if I know it's a fault of mine that if you tell me I've got a year to do something, I'm probably going to wait 11 months and then get started on it. So if you have a kind of a shorter time frame, keep it to about 90 days or so. That's usually enough time to get something done, but it's soon enough that you have to get to work on it sooner rather than later.
And really, you want to be moving dials and having successes along the way. So the key takeaways today, really, profit is vital for any organization to grow. An organization must understand customers' needs to grow sales. We talked about that quite a bit. All organizations have waste, so waste reduction is always an opportunity for profit improvement. And we've had some very good success facilitating several organizations in that respect. And as with all strategic planning, implementation is the key to success. And for us, we found that the one-page plan has been highly effective. Here's our contact information if you'd like to talk further. And thank you for watching.
Thanks all.